Well, to follow on from that, Bonnie, in order to understand the arcane laws, we have to reconcile a paradox. And that paradox is doing without doing. Now, there's no doubt that we're experiencing that when stillness and movement meet, perpetual stillness and perpetual movement meet, there's no reaction, there's only response. But there's also doing without doing. So to be able to reconcile this allows us to understand the workings of the arcane laws. And this is really their foundation. But there's a story that may help us to bring about that understanding of that reconciliation. There was a man by the name of Guo, and he lived in a certain province in China. He was very rich. And then there was a man by the name of Xia, who lived in another province of China. And he was very poor. Now, poor Xia heard about rich Guo, and he decided that he was going to make the journey to find this man, to find out what was the secret of his wealth. So he traveled the great distance to the province in which Guo lived, and when he met him, he asked him what was the secret of his wealth. "Oh, it's very simple," said Guo. "I stole. In the first year that I stole, my life got better. In the second year that I stole, I began to get rich. And in the third year, I became so rich, I was able to help those in need." Well, Xia didn't wait for any further illumination. He just beetled right up and started to steal. He climbed over people's fences, he went into their homes and stole their goods, and he all of a sudden became very wealthy. But you know how these things are. Before very long he got caught, got roundly beaten, thrown into jail, and all his stolen goods taken away from him. So when he got out of jail, he was as mad as all hell. So he was going to beetle off to old Guo and tell him that he'd been given misadvice. So he went off to Guo, but when he met Guo, Guo greeted him very affably and with great sincerity, asked him, "Oh, how has your life been?" "Ah," said Xia, "so much for your advice. I've lost everything I stole, and I got thrown into jail, and everything was taken away from me." "Oh," said Guo, said, "you know, what I meant by stealing was that everything is created out of heaven and earth, a manifestation of the unity between heaven and earth. And from this unity, the seasons come. So I stole the spring rain, and then I stole the summer sun to grow my crops. And then there was abundance of fish in the streams, so I took the fish to feed my ponds." And so on and so on. He went on enumerating how, through this unity and stealing, he became rich. But he said, "You see, from this stealing, there is no retribution. Unlike you, you stole from people. You stole their goods. You stole their livelihood. So you had to be punished according to the laws of humanity." But Xia wasn't at all accepting of this explanation. So he went off in great huff. And as he was walking down the road, he happened to meet a great sage. And he told the sage his story. "Ah," said the sage, "you haven't understood at all. Your friend God was using stealing in the sense that there was no need to ask. But you, in your ignorance, have not the understanding to grasp this." How does this aid us to reconcile that which arises in our lives now, when in a perpetual state of stillness and life's movement moving into that stillness and bringing this paradox of doing without doing? How does this story reflect on this paradox? What does it mean, stealing without retribution? Stealing because there is no need to ask. Or we could translate that, doing without the need for any return. What does it mean? How do we reconcile this fundamental law that arises from the meeting of stillness and movement? No reaction, only response. And doing without doing. Life goes on. Where is stillness? And yet stillness is perpetually here. And here is where we find ourselves.
In that sense, stillness is like an undercurrent. It's always there, and on the surface it's just being open to what's available at the time, and in that moment.
Right.
So when the fish are there, we take the fish, and when the sun shines there, we take that.
Okay. But we're coming to a place now in our endeavors where stillness, the word stillness, and what it connotes for us is changing. Because when we examine that stillness, we find it's just a doorway to something else. This is where it's leading for us. But first, we have to know and understand the workings of the laws of life relative to this. For the moment, we call it stillness, because we're present, attentive, alert. We have nowhere else to be. Is it really stillness? But first, let's reconcile the paradox, and then we can delve into what it is that lies seemingly behind stillness. Maybe we can say stillness is just a doorway. But for the moment, we need to make that reconciliation, because otherwise the question is perpetually there for us. Well, I'm still doing. Life is going on. There's always something to do. And yet, fundamentally, we're not doing anything because we're always here. How strange is that? So we need to reconcile this before we can go behind that door. Stillness is not what it seems.